Suko.
Hello,
There he
hello.
is.
Yeah.
Looking, you don't look tired at all. You don't look like it's, what time is it, by the way?
Almost 10 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on my office.
Yeah, it looks like
this
it.
is our company.
Ah, very good. Okay.
Many people after work. Yeah.
Does he carry around a whip as well? Like, whoosh, whoosh. Okay. It's actually the office space is, well, I don't know. I guess I was gonna say it's nice and open, like an open space.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's nice. Sometimes that's really distracting. I guess it depends. Yeah. Nice. Is the commute back home a lot faster in the evening like this because there's not as much traffic, as many people?
30 minutes subway, almost.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Asuko, we're just about to start, and there's a number of people who have seen you in GitHub and seen you in comments and other things, but there's a few folks on the phone that might not have gotten a chance to see you in person. Do you want to?
Yeah,
do you want
yeah.
to say? You want to say hi and then introduce? Just say a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Asko, and I'm the material of the lawyer file organized. And nowadays I joined the GNU Hard project as a maintainer. Now I'm preparing my English exam. It's a hard work for me. Yeah.
That was perfect. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Good. Well, yeah, all of you have seen Usuko's active in the community, but the time zone difference makes it difficult for him to join. Plus, he has slave drivers for managers. And then also he's been dramatically improving his English over the last year or so, and so we're fortunate that he just happened to be awake and able to join. So this is nice. This is nice because there's a lot of things that we end up talking about that Asuko misses some of the context of because of the time zone difference, and we try to write a lot of things down. I think as a community, we generally do a better job than a lot of other projects about documenting things that we're doing, about, like, actually there's a lot of Google Docs, but still some of what we discuss doesn't get captured, or even though we take meeting minutes, like it's not all of what was said. And so this is nice. So we have Asuko today. Let's get going. Let's share these meeting minutes. We'll put a link into the chat for those that might not have the minutes. But please jump in, take notes as we go. There's a number of you who have topics listed today, which is great. And so if you're on the call, a couple of things. One, just a reminder, we record the meetings and post them on YouTube. Also, if you're on the call, record your name down, get your attendance in there. And with that, we're off to our first topic. So Piyush, I think this is you.
Hello, can you hear me?
There you are. Yeah.
Okay, so Navendu told me to check out the perf command. Okay, so I was going through the code and I found out that it was not working. And why it was not working, I also checked out that let me share it. Oh, my computer is really slow. Okay, yeah. Is it visible?
It is. It's coming up.
Yeah. Okay. So, like we can see that this is the part of the code which is actually failing, like fail to add authentication details to the request. Okay. So what is happening here is it is trying to check out this file auth.json in .meshery folder, but it is not making sure that it exists. We can see here that it doesn't exist, and it is trying to fetch it, fetch the details from it and add to the request, but it doesn't exist, so it fails. So we kind of have to add some logic here to either fetch the token file from the API and make sure it exists before we try to attach the token and the authorization details to the request. And other than this, I couldn't test out many things because it was not working at all. So I think this is the first thing we have to make sure to fix. That's it.
Ooh, so I wonder if we don't have a horse before the cart, a chicken before the egg going on. Like in order to make an API call to retrieve a token, you would
Mhm.
have to be authenticated. And in order to authenticate, you'd have to have
That file here.
a token.
Ah.
Yeah.
So how do we do it now? Like, I is there no like do we already have any function to like get this file, or we have to create it from the scratch?
I'll let someone else speak to that.
I believe Meshery system start would be a prereq to start system performance command, right?
Yeah,
So
I
once
have.
Meshery starts, you could
Mhm.
download it from the UI, get the token part. So I think there should be a way to programmatically do that as well, right?
Yeah, that's what
Get,
we are like saying, that if to download that token file, we kind of already need that token file. Yeah, Ali, and that's what you were saying, huh?
Yeah, basically. The essence of it is, yep, this is pretty similar to a lot of other software that hey, when you want to communicate with its API, in this case it's REST API, that you need to have an authenticated session. And Meshery CTL is, while it's a first class client, it's a client all the same, just like Meshery UI. So before anyone is allowed to use Meshery UI, they first have to authenticate. They have to establish a session. And so the same thing for Meshery CTL, it needs to have a session so that because Meshery as a management plane is empowered to do any number of things to your infrastructure, you need to make sure that it doesn't have open APIs that anyone can come and abuse. And so, yeah, this injects a small manual process currently where, yep, if you want to use Meshery CTL for most of its functions, you've got to present a token, and in order to get that token, as a user today, to get the token, you sign in, establish a session, download the token from the UI, and then from there you can
Hmm.
use that token on your. In the future, as a matter of fact, we might talk about the roadmap here in a little bit, but there's hope for supporting OAuth as a more convenient way of still securely, allowing Meshery CTL as a client to securely communicate with the REST API. And that OAuth flow would be a little nicer. The flow would be more like you would go to invoke a Meshery CTL command, and you know, it would recognize that you don't have a token or a valid token at the time. So it would automatically open up a small session of Meshery UI, have you auth, and then when you're done authing, download the token to your local file system. It would just sort of grease the wheels, and you still have to establish a session and get. So that's one thing in the future that might help. Another thing in the future that might help is some way of making it either longer lived tokens, so that you only have to do the process once or twice. In part, the hope is that people are using Meshery in their pipelines, in their CI pipelines. And so one of the easiest ways for them to do that is to script around Meshery CTL rather than the REST API. But either way that they do it, they'll need to have a valid token. So we'll need to facilitate the process of programmatic authentication, you know, like making that a little bit easier. Yeah. So anyway, the short of it is, yeah, it's a good idea that you had. I think we're going to find that we're going to have to just, you know, let the user go grab the token and bring it back. And so understanding that, you're saying that this particular command is looking for a token in a particular location on the file system. Although
Yeah,
it
in
doesn't
Meshery.
doesn't it still have it has a token flag though, right? Like you can say -t and then tell it where your token is, which doesn't have to be, it can be in any location, right?
We are actually fetching the location from this side. Like we are fetching auth config file that is saying auth.json, and set file location is actually where it is. A set file location is actually joining the file path with Meshery folder here. And that is being fetched as the default option, utils.auth config file, and we are using it here, token path.
Okay, that's good. So does that change your assessment as to whether or not it's broken, or if there are improvements to be made?
I'm not sure what to do here. Like I thought that we should fetch it from API, and I'm not sure how to do it now because you told me that we already need token to fetch the token from UI also.
Cool. I guess maybe if this is okay, and Nivendu, I'm kind of looking to you, but if this is okay, that we might, Piyush, as we walk through the rest of the topics, if you could establish a session with Meshery UI, download your token, and then try to run this command, but with that fresh token, you know, as a
Oh
flag.
yeah,
And then maybe we'll circle back toward the end of the call and see where we're at.
yeah, sure.
Oh, and there's probably room for improvement, by the way. I mean, there's a reason why Nivendu is asking you to take a look at it, because I think he collectively, we sort of anticipate that there are some rough edges, and so yeah, please try to break it. I think, you know, please try to identify where it can be improved. It's good. It's good. And you had the right idea, by the way. I like a great idea. Hey, why not just make it easy for the user? We'll just we'll grab the token on their behalf.
Yeah.
Any other feedback for Piyush?
Oh, I don't have any feedbacks right now. I'm just trying what you just said, like downloading the token and running it with that token, placing it into the
Yeah,
exact location and then running it.
yeah. One
I'm
feedback might be that like we download the auth.json file in the downloads folder. So maybe set that path as the default path here instead of the .meshery folder. Yeah, but
Anybody else want to second that motion? Anybody else agree?
But I think like we can't set it up like that. Where like we have to access the API now to download that token.
Yeah, like leaving the like getting downloading the token part right now, and like the user have to manually download the JSON file from the Meshery UI, and after that they can just use the Meshery CTL perf and slash t dash t and provide the path to the token file. Yeah, for now.
Okay, so I'm we can try that. I guess we have to just tell the users to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Right. That is what we tell them to do today. Actually, what I mean, what Nivendu was just saying is like to your point, Piyush, about trying to make it convenient for the users, is that instead of assuming that that to look for the token under this file name in this directory, maybe just continue to, like if the user runs the command with no token flag, we'll just make the assumption that they do have a valid token named auth.json and that it is under the path home/downloads. Just as a guess, like maybe 50% of the time that would be the case, and if it works, great. But if it doesn't, then we just give them the same error that we give them today, which is you make sure that you have a valid token, go download it, etc. He's just saying update the file, the default directory from auth.json to home downloads auth.json. I take it that doesn't make sense, or does it, Piyush?
Oh, I couldn't hear you. Can you repeat actually? Like,
Oh, okay. You know what? Let me. I'll we'll type it out. Nivendi will type it out to you. So we'll. Good. Oh, thanks. Okay. Any other feedback for Piyush? All right. Utkarsh, you're up next. Performance profiles.
Yeah. So let me quickly show the docs. Should I share my screen? Or
Sure. Yeah. Please. No. Yeah. Please do. I mean, yeah. Either way.
Is it visible?
There it is.
Okay, so this is a really short update. Recently, by recently, I mean yesterday, I added a new section in Meshery Docs. It is related to performance profiles, where I am describing what performance profiles actually is. So a brief statement about it, that it is basically designed for scheduling performance tests as well as saving test configurations and stuff like that. In here, I have also mentioned that the scheduling that performance profiles is going to provide you is as powerful as cron, but without the hassle of remembering the syntax. So I mean, this is so it may so I am kind of looking at for a feedback here. Is cron appropriate here? The reason I mean so actually when I say cron, as powerful as cron, it does inherit a few disadvantages of cron. So something like that. So cron has so when we talk about cron scheduling stuff using cron, we are not using cron internally, but we'd be internally using cron expressions. So its inherent inability is that the minimum unit of expressing something is minutes and not seconds. So if you want to schedule something for do it every 15 seconds, you cannot do that because cron expressions does not support that. So that's actually the only limitation kind of we'll be facing, because other limitations of cron is like you don't get logs and you cannot pass environmental variables. We are not going to face such kind of problems in here, but that is one kind of disadvantage that we'll be inheriting. if we go ahead with cron, that is first thing. Is cron expression the right way? And if it's not, please do suggest that what other expression is going to make is powerful as cron, because I mean, as far as I could think, cron was the cron expressions, not cron jobs, cron tabs. Cron expressions were far the most descriptive way, as well as so basically they capture a lot of information in a very kind of minimal expressions. So that is why we are using cron expressions. Something else can also be used. What something else? Please do suggest. That's first. That's the first, primary thing. The second thing is that is this does this make sense that as powerful is cron, provided that it also means that we are inheriting one of the disability, one of the disadvantage of crons. Did that make sense? I mixed up a lot of stuff, maybe threw a lot of things. So
Feedback for Utkarsh. To me, it's the way that it sort of rolls off your tongue kind of sounds kind of slick. Like you're sort of calling to the inner nerd of a lot of people. Like, yeah. A question for you, as you describe that scheduling capability, or what would become the scheduling capability, is it the case that you'd be able to have a performance profile scheduled to, performance test to be run, a performance profile to be run, for example, every Wednesday at a certain time, but all as one schedule, but also have a second schedule where it's the same profile, but potentially running at, Friday at noon, and then a third one, Saturdays at 2 a.m. Would that all be one schedule, considered one schedule, or would that be, or is there a thought toward multiple individual schedulings of the same profile?
it's like if any scheduling can be described in one cron expression, not that you'll be writing one. So, like you said, that do everything. So basically, run test every Wednesday. So yeah, basically run it every Wednesday as well as every Friday as well as every Saturday. That can be expressed in one cron expression. So that would be one schedule. So the unit of one schedule, the unit of one schedule in the backend, in the way that we are representing it, it is basically a cron expression. That is how we store it, not exactly how it's going to work. So the schedule that you just described, that is do it on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, on maybe so basically every month on these few days, or maybe every fortnight on these few days, that can be expressed in one cron expression, and then definitely that's going to be one schedule. So I'm not being extremely clear here, because you can describe a lot of things in cron expressions.
Yeah. A different way of asking it is, can you create two independent schedules and assign those to a performance profile, irrespective of whether or not they could have been expressed in a single, expression or not?
Right now, performance profiles can be performance profiles only have one schedule. If it's not a limitation of the UI, it's a limitation of how it's been implemented in the backend. So if as I was saying, if somehow it can be expressed in one cron expression, it's going to be one schedule, and that's what can be attached to performance profiles. Can be attached in number of performance schedules with performance profiles. Not as of now, but we can definitely extend on that part, and is supporting any number of schedules with performance profiles. Being able to display clearly in UI is going to be a bit of challenge, I guess. I mean, letting users know that now you are creating a second schedule or third schedule or something.
Yeah, right. Okay, good. Yeah, this is good food for thought going forth as as people get an intuitive interface like this to schedule their performance tests. That there may be, that people might want to schedule the test to run one time. They might want to schedule it to run recurring on a daily or a weekly or a monthly or a something, fortnightly or whatever basis. But then they may also have, they may also want the test invoked or the performance profile, the test invoked ad hoc programmatically. And that's in part what Piyush is looking at, is the ability to do that from the command line. Okay. They might, it might be that two individual users want to use the same performance profile, but they want to run it on different schedules. Maybe they one of them might run it ad hoc, one might have a schedule. A different user might create the same schedule for the same performance profile potentially, or the same user that owns that particular profile, they might want to express something that isn't. They might want to have a schedule that isn't necessarily expressible in a single schedule, and so food for thought about how it is that the underlying system is being designed. Hopefully that makes sense. That helps.
Yeah. Any other feedback from someone else?
So some of you may not have seen some Utkarsh's work here on the performance profiles and the way that you'll be able to look back at the history of what those tests have been, and understand when they were run, and look and ultimately, I think Utkarsh is the intention to be able to open up one of these to open up the results from here, the details of that test from here.
Actually, that functionality was present. I disabled because things are getting duplicated a lot. So we already have like a grid view where you can flip the cards and see the details, and then we have a table view. So I disabled it here because it was like the third view that was coming in. That is, you can come to the calendar and just see it right here. I mean, it's up to the community. If everyone here suggests that, yeah, it would be a nice idea to have a third view, you can just come to the calendar, click on to the date, and see the results. Definitely, I'll just add it back.
Okay, and then good. Yeah, I guess that's, yeah. So and then you'll also be able, is the intention for this interface for someone to be able to maybe double click to create a schedule?
Yeah, that's the intention. I mean, you should be able to click in here in the calendar and schedule your tests. That's
nice. Okay. Any other questions, feedback for Utkarsh? All right, nice. And Utkarsh, did you have the next topic as well?
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure if it's, I mean, actually, it may require basically a bit of more brainstorming. So if we can shift it to last and see if we can squeeze it in.
All right, very good. Nice. Thanks for that. Abhishek and Asuko, there's a topic here on a long desired feature to be able to show that in the Meshery UI that people are able to see details about all of the components. Today they can see what version of Meshery server that they're running, but they're not necessarily able to easily tell what version of the adapters. They can see what version of the operator that they're running.
Yeah, I guess so. Basically, the main person who was working on this was Michael. So since he's not on the call, I'll brief what the exact change was or what his intention, what his PR was. Um, so should I share my screen or?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Oops. All right. So his changes were around the protobuf that we're using in Meshery for that is used between Meshery and Meshery adapters. So he's introduced a new function which is called component info, which takes in the request component for request, which is currently blank, and which gives out information about the component here being the adapter, which are the type of the adapter, which is if it is a STO adapter or linked or whatever it is. Um, oh no, sorry. The type would be the name, the type of the component, which is adapter here, uh, and the name would be the name of the adapter, STO service mesh or Kuma, whatever it is, and then the version here, and then the git sha. So basically, this is a new protobuf rework that he has worked on. Basically, yeah, like that. That's pretty much it. So if he's also worked on the adapter library part, I guess. So this will not be a straightforward thing to take it up. Basically, as soon as we make a release in Meshery, we'll need to release adapters as well so that they are compatible. Yeah, so that's pretty much the PR in here.
Okay.
So
Is it
we need inputs.
any
Yeah,
reason not to go forth with this?
no, as in we definitely have to go forth with this, but when is the question? Because we'll need to do it's not this single PR, but it's a combination of this and adapter library and all the adapters all going together because it's a protobuf change.
Yep. Which is fine, right? You just like the answer is now, like now, and then aren't all the imports into of the library and of the protobuf, aren't those pinned and versioned at a particular commit?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sounds safe to me, unless I'm missing something.
You'll need to update the adapter library version in each of the adapters. That's another thing to do.
Yep. Do we have so Asuko is here who can help with carrying that across?
Yes.
So
So
you're
any other inputs over the parameters that we are giving back apart from these?
yeah, some of you are familiar with the fact that there's a spec out there for a messaging framework and notification center. That this is related in some respects to what we're trying to achieve with that larger system, which is a common transit and format for exchanging messages, like a message like what component are you and what's your version. I think that the two are related. I don't know that other messaging framework and where it's at would necessarily need to hold this up, like that this seems like a logical, straightforward step that if the other system engulfed it, that later we could switch over to that other system, or that other system would enhance and augment these messages. Do you see these as similar and related or no?
Uh, well, the source of data are the same or common for both of them, but they both are independent entities, I'd say.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Asuko, does this component info, component, request and response?
I'm
look
not.
about right?
I'm don't familiar with the message struct, but I believe the another gRPC service just for transfer the information about the component information it's maybe a good way. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
And maybe I need more time to check this PR and I believe the author Michael added this RPC server need transfer the object. The object include the component information. So this pretty good idea, but there may some other way. I think I need to check. I need to more time to check this.
Makes sense. So to recap this, the current state of what we have is that most of the individual Meshery components, well, they've been migrating to use a common library, Meshkit. Meshkit helps each of the components have some uniformity, and part of that uniformity is would be reporting on what the component is, like it should be able to self-report, like what its name is, what its version is. In the case of adapters, what operations it supports. And so the adapters all do that, or almost all of them do that today. Any of them that are using Meshkit that report what their name is, what operations they support, I don't know if I forget what else, but part of that would just be extending that functionality to also include its version number. That was the ask in the issue anyway. It kind of yep. And so that there's that's a full thought like that. That's what this whole thing is right here. That's the in totality. That's what this is. On a related, but to Abhishek's point, like separate set of discussions around a common format for exchanging messages, for like tracking the state of operations and activities across the components. That's well, in my mind, they're kind of related or could be, but it's a separate system today. And we're just looking at expanding that notification system. So do we lose Asuko? Yeah. No. So Asuko, does that help? Does that make sense? To differentiate between the two?
Yes, this makes sense.
Okay, nice. All right, Abhishek, can you help with kind of the procedural planning of assuming that this PR goes forward, like the stepwise, how it's easiest to carry this out, so that it doesn't all have to be done all concurrently exactly at the same time, but can be rolled out.
Okay, but yeah, basically we will have to do it concurrently. But yeah, I can like basically create a roadmap for it. We are constrained to do it concurrently because of the protobuf changes, like because the contract changes, and if we release Meshery or the adapter first, it's gonna break the link between them. So
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Any other feedback on this topic?
All right,
Nice.
I guess nobody. Uh,
Um,
cool. I guess next topic is Navendu.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen. So this is a design spec for supporting multiple Kubernetes cluster in Meshery CTL. To give a background on this issue, from a user's perspective, a user can have multiple clusters running, and he can have multiple service meshes running across these clusters, or he can have service meshes spanning across clusters. And he can ideally he can use Meshery to manage uh, all these multiple service meshes. But Meshery is deployed onto a single Kubernetes cluster. So there comes a point uh, where Meshery is deployed into one Kubernetes cluster, but it has to manage multiple service meshes running in other clusters. So in order to effectively handle this, we need to do something in Meshery CTL. So all of the Meshery lifecycle management commands like Meshery CTL system commands uh, should be applied, or should be applied onto the cluster into which Meshery is deployed. And other service mesh management commands in Meshery CTL should also be aware of the other Kubernetes clusters that are running, and which has service meshes that Meshery is managing. So uh, yeah, currently Meshery CTL assumes that the service mesh or the Meshery is to be deployed to the default Kubernetes cluster specified in the kubeconfig file. So instead of that, we are providing the users with an option to specify the path to their Kubernetes config file, and they can also specify the context inside that kubeconfig file. So even if the user is managing multiple clusters, he can even if their default cluster is something else, he can just force Meshery CTL and Meshery to be deployed inside one cluster, and all of the Meshery CTL commands will be applied onto that cluster. And uh, we actually have two designs for this. One is to have the path to config and context inside each context, or we could have it as a separate entity which is outside of each context, and we can just provide the name to each platform configuration. So that is something we need to figure out uh, and see which is best. And coming to the other point, where Meshery needs to be able to manage meshes that are deployed across multiple clusters, and which may be outside the cluster in which Meshery is running. So for that, instead of programming Meshery CTL to do it, Meshery CTL can use the API endpoints exposed by Meshery server, which will use the Meshery operator uh, to make API calls to service meshes that applied in other clusters. So these are the two user stories for this issue. And yeah, that's it. Any input? I'll just share the design spec.
Husseina, what do you think?
Uh, Myself and Navindu discussed a little bit on this. The first approach of like having platform and then the environment type as an input. Uh, so I think I'm missing few things here. So how do we actually? So the Meshery would run on one cluster, but the way to talk to the other clusters is something which I'm not familiar with using the API endpoints. So how do we know about how to connect to the other clusters, and how do we manage the keys or auth tokens or anything of that sort of the other cluster? This is something which I am not very sure from this design spec. Maybe I'll sync up with Navendu offline.
Yeah, it's confusing, or rather, there isn't a clear answer at the moment. There is thinking, like you're thinking on it. I'll toss in a couple of thoughts to hopefully help, and that is oh, by the way, the fireworks make for a nice
Some fireworks, yes.
Yeah, that's cool. Nice.
Sorry
Very
about
good.
that. Yeah.
No. I feel fashionable now. Now we're like, so
Yeah.
the
Some celebrations here. Yeah.
oh, that's cool. The this is a little bit of a mind bender, a little bit of a brain teaser, and Navendu's trying to help us navigate through it by starting off with a definition of terms. And holy cow, what a fantastic thing to do. To before even starting the discussion, let's agree to like not confuse ourselves and call, and use some terms. I'm still trying to swallow the second term, but I don't have a better suggestion, so I'm going to have to swallow. It's confusing because in a straightforward way, if what's Meshery CTL system, Meshery CTL system commands, what are they concerned with? They're concerned with the lifecycle management of Meshery and its components. Great. So Meshery CTL system, when any of those commands, start, stop, restart, logs, etc., when they're starting or stopping or deleting or updating a Meshery deployment, they're concerned with the platform that Meshery server and its components are running on. And there's really like in our world right now, there's sort of only one of those. It's like it's either a Docker host or a Kubernetes cluster. It's just one of the two of those. And the Kubernetes cluster, sure, it could be like there's nuances between the varied differences between like EKS, GKE, and et cetera. And Husseina, you're the perfect, you're the person leading that charge. Great. So all the system commands, they only care about one kube config, and in most respects, like they really only care about one Kubernetes context inside that kube config. Cool. If the world was that simple, we may not need to have this discussion. The problem becomes when people start to use other Meshery commands, like the perf command that Piyush is looking at, or the mesh command, like if someone wants to use Meshery CTL to provision a new service mesh. Okay. Well, they might have 24 Kubernetes clusters, and that's not a large number. They might have 86, and that's still not that large of a number. It's decent sized, but there are organizations out there with hundreds of Kubernetes clusters. Heck, so anyway, point is, if they're seriously using Meshery to manage their service mesh deployments, their service mesh, and they're using their service mesh deployments to do some meaningful things, it's going to be a multi-cluster thing. Multiple clusters are going to come in here. Okay, fine. They're also going to have different environments, you know, production and staging and development and other things that they're going to, you know, it's quite possible that they're going to have multiple Meshery deployments. So multiple Kubernetes clusters, multiple Meshery deployments. All right, so things just got complex. They get complex because of because of the other lifecycle management commands for a service mesh or for an application or for performance tests. Because when someone says, I'd like to deploy Linkerd, they may not want to deploy Linkerd on the same cluster that they've deployed Meshery. As a matter of fact, that cluster that they deployed Meshery on, that might be like a management tools cluster, like a utilities cluster, a cluster that has monitoring and management software like Meshery on it. It might be like, it might be separate from their workload clusters that are running other applications. Organizations have a bunch of different ways of divvying up where they're running what workloads and namespacing and all this stuff. Okay, well, so if I want to run Meshery CTL mesh start Linkerd, but I don't want it to Linkerd to run on the single kube config that I know about. Like I need some moniker, some way of telling Meshery, hey, actually, as you go to execute this command, I don't intend for that to happen on the same cluster that you're on. I'd like to give you this piece of context, this string, this basically, I want to give you this cube context, this a string that matches a particular cube context that you should have loaded up. You should be aware of, like a user may have, and these are things that have yet to come, Husseina, but this is kind of the start of the environments discussion. In Meshery server, you should be able to go over there, load up, a few different kube config files, each of which may have, 5, 6 or so contexts. So now Meshery server's got like 25 contexts. Great. Right. Now that it has that, cool. Cool, I think you got what
so each context would have a platform and name, and then from there we can go to the correct platform type and pick the kube config, and maybe we could use Viper calls to load that up and read the cert related information or anything of that sort to connect to the actual workload clusters, right?
That's about right, except for the one item that might be a little bit off is that if I'm a user on my laptop, I might have some kube configs and some contexts locally, but Meshery server is deployed like all the way over there in US East 1 in EKS. And that Meshery server may or may not have the same credentials, the same kube configs, same context. So as a user, like the user flow for this might be something like, okay, I would like to provision Linkerd onto my development system, my development Kubernetes EKS cluster. And so let me just double check. Let me just do a Meshery CTL platform LS, platform list, or Meshery CTL deployment LS or something. Like, give me the names of retrieve from Meshery server all the names of the environments, Meshery CTL environments list, all the names of the environments that I know that this Meshery server, this deployment has access to. Because actually, I have a different Meshery server that's deployed in GKE, and it knows about different environments. So I actually need to switch between my Meshery server contexts. In one, anyway, so you check to see what the string is for the context that in EKS, the US East 1, the development cluster, it's called Lee Dev East. And when I do a Meshery CTL environments list, it says, okay, well, for my current context, my mesh config context, here's the list of things that server, Meshery server knows about. There's the name. Okay, great. Thank you. Meshery, now I can go deploy Linkerd. Meshery CTL, mesh, deploy Linkerd -P for platform or -C for context or whatever. Like, okay, Lee Dev East. Great. Okay. Something like that. That's a possible scenario, right? Like, well, what I was trying to point out is that like, I don't know that pointing to kube configs here in like, I may have led Navendu or astray some in the conversation that we were having before about keeping track of references, file path references to different kube configs and to their contexts. And maybe that's helpful. And maybe it's also, I don't know. You might, I don't, I think I don't know. I think I don't have the right data points. It might be the case that like, while I said that Meshery, like the user and my laptop might have all of my kube configs that, I mean, it probably has all the kube configs that have access to. And I've probably loaded some of those into Meshery server. It's possible that there's a discrepancy. It's possible that I forgot to load them, or that I wasn't ever given them, but I was given access to Meshery server to use it to do some stuff, even though I was never directly given the kube config to do the, okay. So some of this is a little bit of an unknown. Some of it we don't have to overcomplicate. I might have just made something super complicated. That our challenge becomes, when you simplify it, it's just, hey, when you run when you want to tell Meshery to do Meshery CTL, when you want to use it to do something that other than manage the life cycle of the Meshery server deployment, well, you need to pass along a little bit of information, a little bit of context as to where you would like for Meshery to do that thing. And the reality is, like, it might be an environment name. Like, it might not literally be the context name of a Kubernetes context or a Kubernetes namespace or whatever. Like, it might literally be the name of an environment. Like, oh, okay. So in Meshery, you will have created environments. That's the Lee Dev East that I call that Lee Dev East. And so I'll just simply, like, it's very simple. I don't need to think around with kube configs locally and stuff. I'll just say I want a new linkerd set up in Lee Dev East, like, based on the fact that I set that up in Meshery server. So now I'm just.
Yeah, I think we still need to define that correctly, right? Like based on whether it's GKE or EKS. So it, we have to make it generic enough so that if it is GKE, it would ask for a few things, right? Like the service account or something,
Yeah.
so that we can
This
fetch the, yeah.
Yeah, in this particular flow, that we're kind of assuming that Meshery server, like a prereq for this user flow, is that Meshery server is already deployed. You've successfully run Meshery CTL system start, and Meshery is running in whatever Kubernetes environment that it's running in. And that,
Okay.
when you pass along the command to Meshery server to deploy a new linkerd instance in a GKE environment, that it becomes the responsibility of Meshery server to say, to understand that that's actually a GKE environment. So Meshery server needs to do whatever it needs to do specific to GKE to do its thing. But the Meshery CTL doesn't, it only needs to care about the fact that a cluster was GKE only when it was doing a Meshery CTL system command, only when it was really trying to start or stop or do any of the system commands for Meshery.
Okay.
So I mean, Hussein, the path that you've been on, I think is probably the same. That it makes sense for trying to make sure that Meshery system start, any of the system commands, that Meshery CTL is cognizant of what type of Kubernetes cluster is there. I think this doesn't change that path. I think that work, continues as is. from Meshery CTL's perspective, as you start to look at other commands, that's when this other environment concern comes into play.
Yes.
Nice. Okay. I didn't mean to aim all of that at you but necessarily. I mean, unfairly. But yeah. Any other thoughts on this that other people have about, multiple Kubernetes clusters and context? Good. Yeah, it's a lot to digest. Thank you for putting on a paper, Navindu. It's like you've got a call for comment, I guess, a request for comment. All right, we're just at time. Anything that, I know we have like 5 more topics that didn't get covered. Anything that's urgent that needs to be spoken to today? So Piyush, you're saying you tested the command pointing to local auth.json, and okay, good. So yeah, Piyush, great. Thank you. You'll put your notes into Slack. It sounds like a little bit later. So cool. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Nice to talk to you all. Catch you on Friday. Thanks for the fireworks, Susanna. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.